Mark Zandi, he's from Moody's Analytics, obviously, the chief economist there. Mark, good to see you. Thanks for weighing in. Your observations on today?
Well, I'm not surprised, Maria. I am a bit disappointed. I do think the U.S. economy, the labor markets are in a place where zero doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, it's not a big deal if they decide to raise rates in October at the December meeting. I don't think it makes a big difference. But the longer they wait, the greater the risk that at some point they're going to have to play catch up, raise rates much more aggressively, and I don't think that's the kind of path we want for the future. So, it's not a big deal, but I am disappointed. I thought they should have gone today.
A lot of people are disappointed, certainly on Wall Street. We heard everybody booing on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. What about the point that Charlie...
I heard you say that. I didn't hear that.
Yeah,
that right?
They were booing when they said no rate increase. What about the point that Charlie just made? The fact that, look, she's telling us that most observers and Fed officials expect a rate hike by the end of the year. So if not now, what's the difference if it happens next month or in December?
Well, I think it's risk management. They want to see, I think, two things. This is my sense of it. The first is they want stable financial markets. So if stock prices keep going up and down and all around, credit spreads gapping out, value of dollar continuing to rise, it's going to make it more difficult for them to raise. So that's a necessary condition. And the second thing is I think they want to see more wage growth. They want proof positive that the labor market is as strong as I think it is, and that it is approaching full employment, and that we are going to get that wage growth. And if they get those two things, then I think all the pieces in the puzzle are together for a rate hike. I suspect it's going to be October's too early for all of that, but by December I think they'll have what they need.
Lou Dobbs.
Mark, implicit in the numbers and the statements of the Fed chair today, we're looking at U3, very bright, shiny number. U6, which is the broader measure of real unemployment in this country, that is frankly, a desperate number. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, it's high, but Lou, this is the point. Just stick with the arithmetic here. So the economy is creating between 200 and 250,000 jobs per month. That's right. What we've been doing now for almost 3 years. Mm-hmm. To absorb the growth in the working age population, we need job growth of no more than half that. So at the current pace of job growth, if we stick to it, and every indication is that we will stick to it, we're going to absorb all the U3 and all the U6, which is, those part-timers that would like to work full-time, and all those discouraged workers, by the summer of 2016, so less than a year. So, this economy, the job market in particular, is a train moving down the tracks pretty fast, and we're going to get what you want by the summer of 2016, and then some. We're going to blow past that if we don't start raising rates a little bit sooner here. And the problem we're going to have a year and a half from now, and certainly 2 years from now, is not unemployment. It's not underemployment. It's going to be a screaming lack of labor. So that's a thing that we have to guard against. We want a tight labor market. It's been 10 years since we had a full employment economy. I'm all in for that, and I want to see stronger wage growth. But we want to make sure that we don't have wages and prices rise too fast and cause the Fed to have to raise rates too aggressive, because that will short-circuit what we want.
I think what you're describing is a high-class problem, one that we would all get very excited about if it were to come up on a near horizon. But the fact is that we are looking at a 1.5% decline in household net worth last year. We still do not see this reflected in wage growth. Labor costs just are not rising to suggest and corroborate the demand that you see, at least right now. At what point are we going to see actual working wages rise? When are we going to see net household net worth rise? When are we going to see prosperity return? Because without it, U6, U3, and whether or not Janet Yellen can describe adequately the condition of the economy doesn't mean a thing to the working man and woman and the middle class.
And let me add on to that, Mark, on to Lou, because the fact is, let me just say one thing. Mark, if the labor market was doing as well as you suggest, 9-1, 9-1 for making sure rates stay unchanged, that's a big...
Maria, that's a dissent. Dissent's a big deal. Yeah. I mean, I could be on the Fed and I could not agree with I would be a proponent of raising rates, but that doesn't mean I would dissent. That's a pretty big step, right? So that doesn't mean any, in my mind.
Explain that a little bit, because most of us don't. Can you explain that a little bit, Mark? Because most of us don't get that.
Can I intervene just for a second? No, I'd like to hear, Mark, you were going to answer my question about corroboration from other data for an improving labor market. I'd love to hear your view.
Okay. Okay, and then Charlie, I get back to your question as well. So Lou, I'm very sympathetic to what you're saying. Although I don't know where you're getting your data on household net worth. That has been rising very, very significantly.
It's from the St. Louis Fed.
At a record high. So I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about.
St. Louis Fed.
Maybe it's the median net worth you're talking about.
No, it's a
Federal Reserve.
And you're right about wage growth. It's very much forecast, right? So, but that's what you have to do when you're at the Federal Reserve setting monetary policy today, because that affects the economy today, the change today, over a year or 2 years. So you do need to make those projections, and all the trend lines are pointing to a job market that's going to be very, very tight, and wage growth is going to accelerate. Let me just say one other thing about that, Lou. If you go back and you look coming out of every other recession, I'm getting older now, as you can tell. I've been through a number of cycles.
It's a big club,
and
Mark.
We're always, in every case, we're all saying, where's the wage growth? Where's the wage growth? Where's the wage growth? And then boom, there it is. Because what happens is that companies do everything they can not to raise wages. They'll say, stay at home, take a day off, work at home, I'll take you out to lunch, because they don't want to raise the wage. But ultimately, they get to a point where they have no choice because the quit rates are too high, the retention rates are too low. And when it's one company in each industry that raises wages, every company in that industry has to raise wages, and it's like a hockey stick. And that's, in my view, that's my expectation. I could be wrong, and you're right, but that's my forecast. And if I were sitting there at the Fed looking at all this, I'd say it's about time not to raise rates from 3 to 4 to 5. I'm saying raise them from 0.
Yeah, that's a great point.
This is Charlie's point, from 0 to a quarter point. That's what we're talking
about.
Mark,
explain the 9-to-1 thing, because I thought it was like a shutout for the Doves, and you're saying there's an interpretation here. Explain it a little bit.
No. I mean, it's what you're sitting around a table and you're debating this, and you have a vote, but everyone has a different perspective and view, and it depends on the level of your confidence and how much you want to be out there. So it would be very unusual. It's a big step for most people on the Federal Reserve to step out and say, I disagree with the committee, right? They don't want to do that except under extreme circumstance. So there could be a number of, and I'm sure there are, a number of members on the committee who probably are thinking in a different direction. They would much prefer to raise rates, but decide,
Mark, that's not the way they voted.
Given the sense of the committee, I don't want to.
Nine people said we don't want to raise rates versus one being Jeffrey Lacker saying, yeah, we should raise rates. So, you're analyzing what they're thinking, but the vote was 9-to-1.
Sure. Yeah,
so
sure,
so my question, just to come back to that, if the labor market is so strong and getting stronger, why would 9 Fed officials say we can't raise rates right now versus 1 that says we got to get
because they don't feel strong enough in their forecast and their views at this point to take that very large step and publicly dissent. They do not want to do that, even if they
We're talking
in their hearts
zero bound
believe,
rates. It's not
I
that
think
big
it's
of a
time to
jump.
raise rates.
Right.